Hi, it's Matt Howard here for newshooter.com, and we're here at the Teradek live show at the Vitek booth at Amsterdam 2014. I'm joined by DP Phil Coates and Dara from SanDisk.
Hello.
So we're going to talk about media today. So what's new with SanDisk? What have they got that's new that's out? How have you found the reaction to CFast?
Oh, it's really good. I mean, we've got the CFast 2 cards now in 128 and 64 gig. They're certified by ARRI for their new cameras. They're also certified in the Blackmagic Ursa. And what's really good about that, they've got the 2 slots now for the hot swapping. So you've got really high speed. You're coming up to nearly SSD speeds on 515 writes, which is amazing. Like you were saying about the small size of cards, that something this size is giving you the speeds that something that, you know, was that size and kind of in the realm of high speed, high size storage is now something you can drop into your pocket.
So there's obviously a lot of interaction between, say, SanDisk and camera manufacturers when they go to implement, because obviously if they want to run a certain type of media and they want to put it in their camera, they have to be pretty hands-on with you guys. So what's the process like in terms of the collaboration between a camera company and yourself in terms of designing media or coming up with new media? I mean, people probably don't know, but what was the whole reason and how CFast came about in the first place?
We actually have a director of integration, effectively, Patrick Hanlon. You probably met him. He's the man. He's the guru. He knows everything about every camera, every piece of technology. He spends his life going around talking to the likes of Canon, to the likes of ARRI, to Blackmagic, Atomos, and making sure that during the product development process, they're kept closely in the loop, so that when the products launch, so like the Blackmagic Ursa is out now, that the card is available and certified and works, and that you don't have to have this issue where you're going, I've got a great camera, what's the card I use? You want to go back to the manufacturer and you want them to say, IBC, these are the cards that will work. And like Phil said, you want that confidence and reliability that when you're out in your shoot, the speed is going to be there, the reliability is going to be there, because that's what you're paying for.
And it must be a real challenge. We have so many new formats coming out, and everything seems to be taking up more space and require, high frame rate cameras. They need very fast recording media. Is it a real struggle keeping up with the technology these days?
I think it's a really great challenge. I mean, when I look at SanDisk and I look at what they're doing, and you kind of look at their story arc from speed and capacity, every year it's kind of almost bypassing Moore's law. You're just going, what we've got, like in our enterprise range, we've got 2 terabyte going up to 4 terabyte SSDs, which will eventually make their way down into consumer lines. And you look at the bump in the capacity on the 512 gig SD card. I mean, people nearly tripped over. They hadn't seen it. They're walking by, and you go, "Did you see the new 512?" And they go, "Whoa, what the heck?"
Have you got one here?
Unfortunately, not.
Well, I didn't even know that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
512 gig in a card that size.
Yeah, and that's in the Extreme Pro range. So that's, you know, certified for 4K, and I think the applications of that one are where you can, it's like a set and forget, because if you put a 32 or a 64 into your camera, you're going to have to run back at some stage, especially if you're shooting in high res. If you have a 512, you can leave it sitting there. Sebastian was doing one of those 4-day stop motion things with the Canon 4 setup. 512s in all the cameras, see it, job done.
Just leave it to run.
So just for people who are out there, what sort of record time would you get for how many hours can you record on a 512 gig SD card?
512 gig
recording
SD
a basic sort of codec must be a ridiculous amount.
You got me on the capacity there. Can I check my brochure?
We'll just say a lot.
Lots.
You could probably go for a couple of days, maybe.
Yeah. At least. He's got to crunch the maths.
Yeah.
Now, Phil, media is something that's changed dramatically, probably particularly over the last 5 years, I guess, with the introduction of, say, like the Canon 5D, and we started moving away from tape or disc-based sort of formats, and then we suddenly went to recording formats that were tiny in size.
Absolutely.
And I guess from your experience over the years, you would have started off using tape or maybe film even.
Yeah.
What are the changes in terms of shooting today as they were back in those days, where you had, the physical size of the media was large, the media didn't run for very long, and it wasn't very, weather resistant, for instance?
Well, I think over the years is that I've seen from 16mm through to tape, analog tape, digital tape, but actually to be able to record solid state, and it all started out really shooting video sequences on my 5D Mark II. and being confident enough to be able to kind of deliver high quality video, high resolution video to my clients using a DSLR, it kind of made me think, well, what's the future? And it was back in 2010, I actually had an assignment where I was crossing the Arctic Ocean and working on an international scientific expedition. I was commissioned to shoot a feature documentary about this. And clearly I needed cameras and I needed recording media that were robust and totally reliable. And I was looking at the cameras from Canon, Panasonic and Sony, and comparing and contrasting and actually doing tests in a cold laboratory in the Midlands. And using commercially available compact flash cards in the Canon XF series was a real game changer for me. And I actually started to use compact flash as if it was rushes. So rather than dumping down the media at the end of a day or at the end of the shoot, I was able to continuously shoot, and it was a very, very cost-effective but also very reliable way of shooting.
And you don't have to carry around discs or tapes or change film. You know, you could literally, you know, they're this big. You put it in your pocket. You could, you know, they don't take up any room. And how did you find them in you know, extreme conditions?
Well, over a 10-week period, I shot 104 hours in temperatures down to -43 Celsius, and I had one clip card error, and that was because of human error. To be fair, there was spindrift, fine powder snow had rammed itself into the compact flash recording housing. And what I'd done, once I'd got back to base at the end of the assignment, at the end of the shoot, I was able then to run the SanDisk recovery software, Rescue Pro, and I was able then to see the clip, transfer that clip onto hard drives before I travelled home, and everything was fine. I must admit though, my heart did miss a beat when I first couldn't read the clip, but everything was sorted out using that Rescue Pro software.
And why should people choose SanDisk? There's a lot of different variations of media out there on the market. SanDisk has always been, I guess, the premium brand. You know, it's almost like Band-Aid or Coca-Cola or whatever. For instance, you know, you think SD, you think CFast, SanDisk is what comes to your mind. What makes SanDisk superior over, say, any other card on the market? I
think when you look at all the companies out there, all that SanDisk do is memory. They're 100% memory. It's all they've ever done. So they're 27 years in the business, and all of their technology into the future, all of the acquisitions they make are purely related to making the memory better, making the controllers, the firmware, and the software that talks to those. Like you look at the recent Fusion IO acquisition, you know, Steve Wozniak's company, that is to make sure on an OEM side, all the infrastructure behind, you know, your Facebooks and your Googles, where you need all that high IOPS transfer, that's solid, and that future technology will trickle down then into the future of storage. So it's a company that has past, very strong present, and a very clear future. And I think that is something that gives you security and reliability. It's not just a flash in the pan brand. It's not a brand that is going to be out now at a great price and then gone tomorrow. There's lifetime warranties on the products. They have this very close industry integration, which I think really stands to them. So it's the trust factor, and it's a two-way thing, and you don't get that just by, you know, appearing and putting up logos. It's something like, if Phil wasn't sitting there kind of going, I can use this in -43 degrees Celsius, then we wouldn't have done the job.
Absolutely, and I think there's that kind of fantastic progression throughout the history of the company, that they're actually listening to end users and actually listening to camera manufacturers. And it's not only integrating the technology, it's actually integrating workflow and how actual shooters will be using their cards and how they'll be incorporated within the cameras. So for me as an end user, literally at the sharp end and putting my career and all of my recording media onto the cards, it's understanding the technology. I've got trust in the technology, but actually I've got trust in the people and the company, because they actually take our feedback seriously. And that's really important, keeping that kind of loop closed. And therefore you're taking what's going on now, looking to the future, understanding our actual shooting needs, but also then understanding the technology and the cameras from other manufacturers. And I think it's that integrated approach that is actually really unique in the industry.
So looking into the crystal ball into the future, where do you think the direction of media is going to head? Are we going to end up with, maybe, I mean, it's moving so quickly. What sort of is there an eventual limitation in terms of the amount of data or that you can put on a card that small?
Yeah, the data is kind of limited by the die size of the memory. So you're getting down to nanometer level technology. Like when you look at these small cards, it's incredible the amount of technology. You kind of think, it's just an SD card, it's just memory. When you peel that back and then you go into the wafers and all the traces on the silicon, like they're down to 19 nanometer technology now. They're going to move next to 15 nanometer technology, and in the future they'll move to 3D technology. So you're down to stuff that's like at micron level. So that's really what's holding you back. It's how fine you can trace into silicon without overlaps. And as that technology and science increases and you get down to nearly electron level, that's all that's holding it back. And because SanDisk is purely focused on that, that's all they're investing in. They're investing in the next gen and on and on. So it's really it's limitless. You come to these points where you hit a wall, like with SSDs. We've hit the kind of barrier for SATA. You're up like at that 600, so everybody's up at about 550 write speeds. You'll move on then to different technologies, the MSATAs, the M2s, PCI Express, NVMe, and as you start crossing and jumping over those boundaries, then you're just opening up other wormholes. So it's very hard to predict beyond like a year or two basis.
Yeah, I found that whole process really interesting though, because for me the technology is a given, but actually the weak link in the chain is us. It's human error. It's not card error. That's totally reliable and robust. And so you might have a week's worth of rushes on a micro SD card, and what happens with that micro SD? You drop it on the floor and you can't find it. So for me, field management of your media is super important. It's actually understanding the workflow and making sure you actually get the quality material off the card back to the ranch, and make sure you get that back to base. And all the research that I've done when it comes to independent shooters, that's where the issues have been. Not with the cards, it's actually how they manage the cards and manage the media. So I know that we've got 512 gigabyte capacities, but actually, am I going to trust myself? I'll trust the card, but am I going to trust myself with all my hours of footage on that?
And just for young shooters out there, Phil, just in your experience, how many copies do you usually back up when you're out in the field when you're doing material?
Well, the beauty of using the Canon XF range of cameras, I can actually double slot record. So in many situations, I actually will record both cards simultaneously, so instantaneously I've got a backup. And especially when I'm working in challenging or hostile environments. I did a job in Libya, and I was double slot recording. Unmarked police cars turned up. In the midst of the commotion, I was able to hand over the camera, but surreptitiously I actually took out one of the cards, popped it into my wallet at the back. Unbeknown to then, I had that copy and I was able to hand over the camera. For me, that level of integrity is super important. But before I actually travel back, I've got my cards, and I'll use software, something like Shotput Pro, to manage that handshake, and I will do 2 transports. So it's like IT backup. I'm only going to go home when I've got 3 copies.
Yeah.
I keep the cards, and I've then got 2 transport drives that I'll take back to base with me.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, guys. Now, Phil, if people want to see some of your work, is there a website or something they can go to?
Yeah, absolutely. Just go to philcoates.tv.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. Okay, that's all we've got time for right now here at the Teradek live show. We'll be back later on.